The story begins of Esther being at the banquet at the place of the king. At a banquet, Xerxes became drunk and commanded his wife, Queen Vashti, to come out to all his noble men to see how beautiful she was. Queen Vashti refused his request. She didn't want to be paraded in front of everyone in that way. King Xerxes got really mad at her for disobeying his command. He forced his wife to base on the advice of his wise men. Later, when Xerxes was at clear mind, he remembered what he did to Queen Vashti. King Xerxes' servants then suggested to call all the young, beautiful women to be gathered from the territory of his kingdom. The woman who pleased him the most would become the next queen. It is a part of the story where we first meet Esther, a young Jewish woman orphaned at a young age and raised by her cousin Mordecai. She was one of the many women captured and taken to the king's place. Both Mordecai and Esther were worried about what would happen to her while she stayed at the palace. But God watched over her, because the Bible says that she was so beautiful, she quickly gained favor into who encountered her. And when it became time to meet the king liked her so much, more than any other woman. So he put a crown on her head and made her queen. And all through this, Esther was careful not to tell anyone her Jewish background, because it was dangerous. But there would be a time where she would not to hide her truth. She will not have to be scared, because God will provide a perfect reveal of the truth. In Luke 8:17 says, "For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing hidden, concealed that will not be known or brought into the open." For Queen Esther, the truth had to be revealed in one of the most scariest moments of her life, a moment where she would have to decide if she lived or died. Then her cousin Mordecai tells her there is a plot to kill her people. He must go to the king and tell the king what's happening. She begins to doubt herself. How can she speak to the king? She hasn't been summoned in 30 days, but Mordecai keeps telling her she must speak to the king so her people will survive. She tells Mordecai, "I will go to the king, and although it is against the law, I will perish, I will perish." Psalms 48:14 says, "For this is God, our God forever and ever. He will be our guide even into death." With God's guidance, she goes to the king unsummoned. Not only does he not kill her, but he tells her he'll grant any wish he'll want. This can only be God working here, Esther tells the king. She says her wish at the banquet and invites Haman, the man who was plotting to destroy her people, to the Jews, to the banquet. Queen Esther had her courage to reveal the truth, her background to the king and the enemy himself, as well as Haman's plan to have her killed with her people. King Xerxes was so mad at Haman for what he did, he ordered his death. Because of Esther's courage, he was able to save and protect her people in the end. As one of the few women written in the Bible, her story is awesome. She lived in a time where women never had a voice. The queen before her had been dethroned for standing up for what she believed in. She was a Jew, a person without any power or authority. At the same time, how could she possibly thought about she speaking up to the king himself and asking for something so big? But she was strong in what she believed in. Her faith in God, even if it meant the worst things would happen. In 2 Corinthians 12:9-10, it says, "And he said to believe in me. My grace is significant to you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, there will I rather glorify in my infirmities, and that the power of Christ may rest on me. Therefore, I will take pleasure in his infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distress, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak and when I am strong. Great leaders are meant to make hard choices and sacrifices for a bigger cause than themselves. It's really scary to stand up for what you believe in. It's scary to do it right in front of the people who might make fun of you, discourage you, or might even hurt you for it. But when it is the right thing to do, yes, being a leader sometimes will take you out of your comfort zone. Being a leader will test you and challenge you, like Queen Esther was. Who would have thought a young orphaned woman would become queen of a nation? But it was not an accident that she was a Jew and became queen. God moves to special places for special reasons. Esther was placed in a unique situation as queen. She was able to use what she had reached the king for a greater good. Isaiah 41:10, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold your righteous hand." As a leader, I wish to not fear like Esther did, not fear because her God was with her. As a leader, I wish to dismay like Esther because she knew who her God was. As a leader, I wish to recognize when I can help and when I cannot do it alone, so that I may learn on God's strength and help because only He can uphold me in my weakest moments. For me, I may not know where God will take me. I may not know what I'll face in the position I uphold in the future. But I wish as a leader, like Esther, a woman who acts with courage in belief and faith in God. I wish to step out in faith of what is right, even when the odds are against me, because one day I will be chosen for such as time to fulfill God's purpose for a cause much bigger than me. God has a plan for each of us, every single one of us, and we must wait for Him to lead us.
Good morning again. When I was asked what is my favorite leader/character role in the Bible, it took a long time to think about because I admire and sympathize with so many Bible characters, such as Joseph and his endurance and faith in the face of everything that has happened in his life, Daniel maintaining his faith in a foreign land, Peter, who repeatedly did not understand Jesus' mission and still messed up, while still loved by and able to serve Jesus. I decided on Moses, a character who has an entire lifetime of interesting stories to tell. He's experienced life on 2 different continents, was a prince of a powerful nation of that era, as well as a humble shepherd. God allowed him to stand against a world superpower, and the nation of Israel was placed under his guidance, as God was ultimately his source of guidance. He saw the miracles of God happen before his very eyes as God continued to lead him and the children of Israel. The most important trait that I see in Moses was patience. During his life, it was shown that ever since he was younger, he chose to be patient in his lifestyle, choosing to suffer alongside those whom his nation viewed as beneath them. In Hebrews 11:24-26, it states, "By faith Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he looked to the reward." In this passage, I learned that Moses, as soon as he was able to make the choice for himself, chose to identify, to sympathize, and to cooperate with the children of Israel, content with suffering for a greater reward instead of seeking instant gratification. In a world where everything comes and goes in an instant, leaving one more empty as time goes on, we see through Moses' example that, in God, is a path toward fulfillment and a content life that pays off in the long run. As a Pathfinder captain, I learned that merely delegating is not an effective way to lead a group, but rather taking the time to demonstrate, explain, and cooperate is a way not just to lead a group, but to build a relationship with them. A counterexample, a counterexample is found in the time when Moses decided to take matters into his own hands. Seeing his fellow Israelites suffer harshly under an Egyptian overseer, he decided to kill the Egyptian and hide the evidence. When he did so, the news quickly spread to Moses' dismay. He fled to the land of Midian as Pharaoh was planning to take revenge. Once in the land of Midian, Moses had to relearn patience after such a grave mistake. He learned to take his time tending the sheep of his father-in-laws. As sheep are naturally less careful about going about things and always getting into trouble, Moses had to learn to be constantly vigilant but not restless. He had to learn to properly take care of the sheep and the various needs that they have, despite what he would rather be doing. This was a job that was looked down upon in the Egyptian culture that Moses was fully immersed into. This position would not only reinstill the value of patience, but also of dedicated care and affection for the menial tasks in life, as he would be leading a different kind of flock in the near future. Although Moses was educated in Egypt, God could not use Moses as he was, as the flaws that caused him to do what he did was still present. Moses spent about 1/3 of his life completing this task, patiently spending his time watching sheep as his main job. God allowed him to have a life and a family. However, his occupation was at the time a simple shepherd. In a world where there is increasing pressure to stay firm in one's life choice, to be successful as soon as possible, we see that the best is still yet to come for Moses. Being successful is not a wrong thing. Working hard to achieve a dream is the right thing to do. However, if one is not in a desirable position in life, that doesn't mean that it'll continue to be like that forever. God has a plan for each and every one of us, and we need to place our faith in him before the plan can truly set into motion. Later in his life, leading the children of Israel, it does not take much to see that Moses has a great deal of patience in dealing with God's flock. At the Red Sea, everyone was amazed and confident in what God could do in their future, bringing them out of captivity with no great show of human force. However, it did not take long for them to lose sight of what has been done in the past, and soon began doing reckless things, coincidentally like sheep in the wilderness. Moses dealt with every problem that was brought to him before taking advice that his father-in-law gave to him to utilize delegates and to streamline the process of decision-making, and even then, that was still strenuous. Moses taught me the importance of patience, not just in dealing with people, but also dealing with self. As Moses failed multiple times, it shows that Moses is still a human being who makes mistakes. However, he does not shift blame or even blame himself excessively. He takes responsibility for his actions, asks for forgiveness, and moves on. In fact, most of the time when Moses decides to plead to God, it is not on his behalf, but rather of the children of Israel, putting every single one of his needs to the side to instead lift up a nation that often disliked his very leadership. In my life, as I continue to grow and develop as a person, patience is something that I could definitely improve upon, especially after I've taken leadership roles that could seriously test my patience. Moses constantly put others' needs above his own for the entirety of his life, especially at the last 2/3 of it. Although I may not have a goat tender to governor story like Moses did, I could also put others' needs above my own by contributing to community service projects and contributing to the community, which this club has allowed me to do many times in the past. I can also inspire those who come after me to do the same, ultimately improving the lives of those in the club, in the community, and ultimately in the world. As this Pathfinder club recites the Pathfinder pledge, law, and song, Moses' example could be found, and one could even say that he was also a leader, like me, leading to the ultimate Pathfinder, Jesus, teaching his laws and commands to the entire nation of Israel, leading them to a much more content and fulfilling life. As a leader of a much more smaller unit, I could still do the same by following his example and ultimately Jesus' example, prompting those around me to do the same.
Good morning and happy Sabbath. Today I'm going to be talking about my favorite leader from the Bible, Paul. As many of you know, Paul was not always your model Christian. Paul, who was known as Saul, persecuted Christians. When we first meet Saul, he was looking after the coats of the people that stoned Stephen. But God had other plans for Saul. One day on the road to Damascus, Jesus appeared before Saul and said, "Saul, why are you persecuting me?" Saul was blinded by the experience until the Lord sent Ananias to restore Saul's sight, and Saul was converted. From then on, he was known as Paul. What I like most about Paul is how he was able to be so forward and blunt to anyone, no matter who he was talking to. When there was conflict over circumcision in the church, Galatians 2 verse 11 tells us that Paul spoke to Peter to his face and that he was to be blamed. Paul was not afraid to call people out on their hypocrisy. It takes a lot of courage to confront anyone on issues. Imagine if the person you were confronting was Peter. Paul needed a great amount of confidence to do what he did. Finally, what I admire most about Paul was how much faith he had in God. In Acts 16, we see the story of Paul and Silas. Paul and Silas were imprisoned. While in prison, the two men began to sing songs and pray to God as the other prisoners listened. Suddenly, there was an earthquake which broke all the doors open and the prisoners' chains. The poor jailer woke from the earthquake and was going to harm himself. He had thought all the other prisoners had escaped. But Paul called out and told the jailer to not harm himself and that all the prisoners were still there. The jailer, in awe and admiration of what had just occurred, began a conversation about God and who he was and is converted. This demonstrates just how unapologetically faithful they are to God, even in the most dire situations. He faced many hardships during his ministry, yet Paul still showed faith and trust in God. He never doubted the Lord and never stopped believing. Even in the hardest of circumstances, Paul did not complain and continued God's work on earth. As Paul shows us, I now know that no matter how much suffering I will experience in this life, my God will be with me. Paul was a strong leader. I aspire to be more like Paul. He teaches me to lead by example and to be confident in my role. He teaches me that I can be fearless when I have total trust in God. Paul teaches me that I am not to rely on my own strength, but on God's strength. Isaiah 41 verse 10, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand." Paul exemplified and practiced this verse throughout his ministry, and I wish to do so as well.
Good morning, church family. As you may have heard the other speeches today, I will be sharing what it means to be a leader and what leadership is to me. Not all leaders are famous like Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King. Most leaders are ordinary people. You can walk down the street and run into someone and not know that they are a very powerful leader. Although some people believe that leaders are born and not made, I believe that anyone can become a leader if they put their mind to it. I personally know of a good leader that is an ordinary person, but first I'm going to tell you about one of the leaders I look up to in the Bible that relates to my real-life leader. It's the story of Esther. Esther was a remarkable woman who was willing to risk her life to save her people. She was a woman of principle who was willing to put the lives of others ahead of even her own life. She was an outstanding example of serving others even under the most stressful circumstances. Jesus Christ said, "Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends." John 15:13. Most of the times our life may be pretty routine, but all of us have a few defining moments when we may be called on to put godly principle above personal benefit. Esther shows all of us the way, and we can be inspired by her example. I met a very amazing person earlier in my life, and since then I've looked up to her as a leader. Her name is Susan Benitez, and most of you may know her by Miss Susan or Miss Benitez. To me, she's an amazing leader. She could be very scary at times, but she always has a fun side of her most of the time. But somehow she manages to put a smile on my face, make me feel welcome wherever I am, and make me feel as though I had a second mom, and probably the same way to many others that have come across her. Most of you may not know, but I was adopted at the age of 3 with my older brother and my younger brother. And yes, sometimes I wish I wasn't adopted. I don't know who my birth parents are. Me and my brothers will grow up not knowing who they are or where they are, probably for the rest of our lives. But I will always wonder about them, not because it makes me sad, but because I just wonder. It's kind of like a missing piece of me. When I grew older and joined Pathfinders my first year in 2013, I began to realize that I know what the real missing piece was, and it was Miss Susan. She makes me feel as though I have that other mom I could go to and ask for help, because she will take the time and listen to what I have to say, even if it's something dumb about boys or talking about snakes and other things she hates. She's always there with 2 open ears and many open hands to help right away. I go to church every week and mostly attend Pathfinders, and the first person that I usually run into is Miss Susan. And I always feel good inside knowing that I have someone not related to me at all that cares for me and loves me a lot. We have the most amazing relationship that I can't even explain. And when I see Miss Susan, I tell myself, if I wasn't adopted, I would have never been able to look up to someone that means so much to me and reminds me so much of many stories I've heard about my mom. Because although I never met her and she gave us up, I know that she did it for us and wanted us to be able to live the life we do right now. When I was about 11 to 14 years old, I remember kids saying stuff that really upset me, like, "At least I know who my real parents are," or "You're so ugly, no wonder your parents didn't want you," or even, "Wow, your parents could have gotten a nice car or house instead of adopting you." Some days I came home and just cried. I get some kids still to this day come up to me and tell me rude stuff, and I know I will get these kinds of people come up to me for the rest of my life. But now I know there will be someone I can always talk to, and I'm not one that likes to talk about my feelings at all. When people ask me what's wrong, I just say nothing and push everything away when I know really my mind is all over the place not knowing what to do. But for some reason, Miss Susan asked me one day what was wrong. I told her nothing was wrong, and then I started to walk out. She yelled my name and I stopped. She said, "You're not leaving unless you tell me what's wrong." She told me she knew something was up and that she was right there not going to go anywhere until I told her what was wrong, even if we were late to Pathfinder dismissal. She didn't care because she wasn't going anywhere until I talked to her. I finally gave up and told her everything that was going on. And it finally felt good talking to someone about what was going on. I started to cry in her arms and I continued to cry. I don't know if you remember this day, but it was over some dumb boy and something else that had happened. And I felt like giving up, but she told me boys are dumb and you are better off without them, and other things that are way more important. I'm sharing this story with you because I look up to her as an amazing role model so that I can be as great as a leader as she is to my fellow Pathfinders in the Koala unit and the other units as well. I was just recently put to being a captain for my unit. I never thought I would be able to do it. Every year I was asked if I wanted to be a captain or if I was ready to. But every year I said no because I wasn't ready. Just recently, Miss Susan asked if I was ready to become a captain, and I said yes for some reason. She talked to me after, and she told me. She asked me because she had faith in me and knew that I could be a great leader for my unit and for someone for the little ones to look up to as hopefully one of their leaders. I am grateful that she had the faith in me to do so because I would have never thought I was ready, but she knew I was and gave me a chance to prove myself wrong. I will forever be grateful for her trust and faith in what I could do. She has always been there for me these past 6 years, and I'm so happy for all she has done. I wish I could say I can't wait to spend my last 2 years with you in Pathfinders, but I can't. Many of you may not know, but after Oshkosh, Miss Susan is retiring from being a Pathfinder, but not saying she won't be a Pathfinder anymore because once a Pathfinder, always a Pathfinder. But I will definitely miss you during my last 2 years of being a Pathfinder. I'm glad I can say that I will carry on all the things I have learned from you, starting from being able to yell at my unit when they're not listening. But they don't do that because they're really amazing people because of what their parents have taught them. Also because I was able to teach them all the things I've learned from you. And also being able to be there for my fellow Pathfinders. Miss Susan has been an amazing leader, not for just me, but for the staff as well as all the other Pathfinders. She is the light that shines on the whole Pathfinder Club. We will miss you greatly, but I will miss you the most. All of our fun memories together we've made in my 6 years of being a Pathfinder will forever stick with me, and I hope they will forever stick with you. I will most importantly miss making fun of you for being afraid of literally everything, most importantly snakes, and I will miss being able to scare you by throwing a fake snake at you. All those fun times I hope you know I will miss so much, but at least we got to make many together. Camping trips will not be the same or regular meetings or anything, but most importantly, I've had lots of fun these past 6 years. From you making fun of me with all the injuries I've had and me getting in trouble and you looking out for me. Being a leader takes courage, discipline, and determination, and I'm glad I'm able to apply this to my life today because of her. While a great leader can bring success, it also comes at the cost of being judged and overwhelmed. The Bible speaks of so many wonderful leaders and how God blessed them for their work. There are many verses in scriptures that God spoke to encourage men and women who chose to step up and lead. I found a passage in the Bible in 1 Timothy 4:12. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. I chose Miss Susan as my leader because she reminds me of my favorite Bible character, Esther, because they both inspire people from their examples. And Miss Susan has showed me the way into leading others into doing good things, like Esther showed the way for others. So that is my leader that shows me the way and who inspires me by her example, and because of it, I thank her. I don't usually express my feelings, but because of all Miss Susan has to put up with me, I will forever call her family and a second mom. Thank you.
Didn't they do great? I was listening to them and I'm thinking, what am I going to do up there? I'm just going to mess it up. But then I remembered when I was about 10 years old, I was wearing the Pathfinder uniform and I was asked to preach my very first sermon. My legs were shaking, my forehead was sweating, my back felt cold, very much like today. And it is that fear of doing something that we've never done before that help us to grow, that help us to achieve new heights, that help us to become the people that God wants us to be. In fact, in that classic cinematic masterpiece, Shrek, that when Shrek goes with this noble steed, donkey, to rescue the princess from the castle guarded by the dragon, Shrek says the wise words, the wisest words in the dialogue of the movie. It says, fear is a natural reaction to an unknown situation. Fear is a natural reaction to an unknown situation. And all of us at some point have felt fear. Fear of taking a test, fear of asking a girl out, fear of coming up to the front of the church and speaking in front of adults, fear of doing something that we've never done before. But God is giving us advice for those specific moments. God is telling us that all of us can be leaders at one point. In fact, the prophet Isaiah lived in times that were very difficult, very tough. It was confusing times for the people of Israel. The country had been divided in two. It was the north and the south. The north suffered because they had become idolatrous and they had forgotten about God's ways. But the south had been influenced by the idolatrous practices of the north. Now, the leaders of the country were causing the people to suffer because they were acting unjustly and they were oppressing the poor. And this is the moment when the prophet Isaiah is lifted up. And he comes to God with fear because he does not know what to do. He does not know how to approach the problem. He sees what is happening to his nation. He sees what is happening to the people of God, but he does not know what to say. In chapter 41, Isaiah receives the advice from the Lord, and he reads in verse 10, "Don't be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you up with my victorious right hand." The message of the prophet Isaiah is a message of hope, a message of victory. And what he's trying to tell each one of us is that every single one of us is born to be a leader. But it's fear that makes us followers. So Isaiah tells us a couple of pieces of advice. The first one is, as a leader, don't be afraid. You are never alone. The first part of the text says, don't be afraid, for I am with you. And you see what happened in the Garden of Eden was that sin caused separation. In fact, the Bible tells us that when God looks for Adam and Eve and he calls on their name, they said, we hid because we were afraid. Sin causes separation, and because of our imperfections, for the things that people have told us in the past, for the names that have been called, that we have been called, for bad experiences and mistakes of the past, we fear that we can ever improve, that we can ever be better, that we can ever achieve better things that we've done. But Isaiah says, don't fear, because I am with you. You are never alone. The second piece of advice Isaiah tells us is don't be discouraged. God is your strength. See, notice what it says in the text in the second part. Don't be discouraged, for I am with you. I will strengthen you and help you. Now, it's quite interesting to see that in the Hebrew, the word for strength has two meanings. The first meaning, this word to give strength to somebody is the result of an experience. First, giving strength is a result of an experience. And I want to think about when somebody goes to exercise for the first time. You remember that? The first time you tried a new routine, new exercise, the first time that you bench pressed or you worked on your legs, what happened the day after that? Oh, you can't move. You're sore. Your body aches. You can't even stretch your arm or kneel down because your muscles are sore. But what is happening with your muscles is that not only they're sore, reminding you what you did before, but they're preparing you because the next time that you exercise them, you're going to be a little bit stronger. And that is the first meaning of this word, that even though it might be hard the first time you do it, you're going to be better the next time you do it. But the second meaning of the word, to give it strength in this passage of Isaiah, is to reach a higher level. And you see what happens in our lives is that at some point we have given up. At some point we have fallen. At some point we have made mistakes. But what God is saying here in Isaiah is that when he says, I will strengthen you, is saying, I'm going to help you not only to get up, but I'm going to take you to a higher level. And you see, that is exactly what God did. When we were at the lowest of the lowest, when sin had brought us down, God sent Jesus so that we can get to a higher level. And by his grace, we can achieve heights that we could never achieve on our own. So he says, don't be discouraged. God is your strength. The third lesson from Isaiah is that it is okay to fail because God will pick you up. It is okay to fail because God will pick you up. It says, I will hold you up with my victorious right hand. You see, in Asian cultures, the right hand is a very important part of the body. I remember when I went to India and we were told one simple rule. Because see, the way that church goes in India, it's a little bit different than we do it here. You see, now at the end of the message, the preacher goes out the door, and as people leave, we shake hands and we wish happy Sabbath. But in India, when I finished my first sermon, the translator who was helping me, he said, Pastor, stay here because people will make a line for you to give them a blessing. So as I stood in the front of the church, the people made a line, and he said, but do not touch him with your left hand. At the moment, I didn't ask, I didn't question, I just followed the advice. He said, touch him with your right hand only. Later on, I discovered that the right hand is the hand that we use to eat, and the left hand is the hand that we use when we don't eat. So he said, if you touch him with the right hand, they'll feel blessed, because the right hand is the hand of the blessing. Now, it's funny to think about it that even in modern times, the right hand is very powerful. Because even in movies, it's the right hand where the glove goes and the snap happens. When Peter and John were walking outside of the temple and they found the lame man, the Bible says that Peter reached with his right hand and picked up the man that was lame on the floor. It was with the right hand. And what God is saying here, that when you're down, when you fall, and when you made a mistake, when you fail, His right hand is ready to pick you up, because it's a hand of victory, it's a hand of power, it's a hand of blessing, it's a hand that gives you authority. It is the hand of the mighty and victorious God. So when you fail, His right hand is there to pick you up. In Hebrews 13:5 it says, I will never fail you, I will never abandon you, says the Lord. I read a story not long ago about a father who in the middle of the night heard that the smoke alarm had gone off. Quickly he rose and out of his bed and went in to check into his kids' rooms. He had a 3-year-old boy and a toddler, and when he walked out of his room, he smelled the smoke and he realized that his house was on fire. Quickly, he went to get his kids. And the 3-year-old boy was walking next to him, and the toddler was in his arms. And in the middle of the confusion and the commotion of the fire, he didn't notice that the 3-year-old went back to his room because he had forgotten his teddy bear. When he got out of the house, he realized that the fire was already blocking the door, and he couldn't go back into the house to get the 3-year-old boy. But out of the window on the second story where his room was, he could see the boy that was there. And he, in desperation, looked up to the boy and said, son, jump, I'm here to catch you. But the smoke did not allow the little boy to see his daddy. He said, Daddy, but I can't see you. And he said, don't worry, I can see you. Just jump, I'll catch you. And you know what, family? That is exactly what our God is telling us. That He has been there all along, even when we can't see Him. Even when we fail, God is ready to catch us on the fall. Because what God wants to do with us is to succeed, to become leaders. Because what it takes to be a leader is to trust in the Word of God. Because He's always been there. And He'll always be. God bless you.